everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Today with Ray. I'm your host, Rhema T, and this is the show that highlights everyday entrepreneurs. This week, I have such a special guest, Paul Campbell with Mister Bartender. If you're new to the journey, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you'll be the first one to know when this episode comes out and how you can support his business. Without further ado, thank you, Paul, so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I've known Paul for couple months to a year, some change now, and I love his work. If you're here in Wilmington, make sure you book him. He's such a great mixologist and bartender. I will sing his praises all day, but without further adu, Paul, thank you again, like I said, for coming on the show. How are you today?
Doing great. I appreciate the welcome in. I feel honored to be part of this, and you give me a lot of credit. I mean, the mixology world is definitely a creative side of people in the food and beverage business that are sharing their knowledge and experience, and I'm happy to be part of that.
Awesome. So as we open up this interview, tell us a little bit about your background and how it is that you became an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I've mentioned, I lived so many lives, but kind of summarizing it, I was born in the South Americas, and I feel like a strong influence of the diverse world in Guyana, where I'm from. Mm-hmm. It's north of Brazil. It's the only English-speaking country out of the 13 countries in that continent. And Guyana is strongly influenced. My last name is Campbell. I did Ancestry.com. I found out I have more bloodlines than imaginable. So all of us are all mixed. But that kind of sets the tone for where we are. And after moving from Guyana as a child to New York City, I focused on creating something that I know I saw from that background. Entrepreneurs is what we have done. My parents, my dad, he was a leather craftsman. Everybody worked for themselves or sell their own products or had their own farm. So we grew up in that kind of environment. So my background has been, influenced strongly with entrepreneurship. But in this concrete jungle, we like to say in New York, straight out of high school, I was really focused on being a pilot. And I wanted to pursue a career pilot opportunity. So signed up for the Air Force, but at 17 and 18, I started getting blurry vision, and at that time, because I'm old in the mid-90s, I have to take back, that, class 1 physical you have to pass needs to be uncorrected. Mm-hmm. So the vision started getting blurry, and you have uncorrected vision. LASIK wasn't very popular then. Yeah. And ASVAB scores, and my counselors and recruiters are all saying, you have great scores, so we'll put you in accounting and finance. So I ended up working in a career in the Air Force for Defense Finance and Accounting Services. Really enjoyed it, but I felt like there was more to offer. And after my Air Force career, we were really, at 22, offered a really great opportunity working at global investment banking down on Wall Street. And that's where I met my wife, and we have 2 beautiful girls now. So that lifestyle was something that kind of I've learned in the corporate world is not really what my creative side wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And one introduction that took for me to go to a really cool venue in New York, at Scholastic, Long Island specifically. It's called the North Ritz Club, and they were doing flambeing and ice sculpturing and white glove tuxedoing, and I'm part of the wedding on the other side, just enjoying the food and beverage atmosphere. And the maitre d' there and I had a conversation how amazing these people are enjoying and having fun, and how can I get involved. So I signed up for, in New York City, you have to be licensed as a bartender. And I started doing 40 hours of really learning about ins and out of bartending and mixology and all the different things. So I really got involved that way. And then that just led into us moving to, the South and the Carolinas. We were introduced to it, to my in-laws, and we just fell in love with the Southern hospitality. Yeah. Great community. It's real. I love that. And entrepreneurship, like I said, has been implanted in me. So we said, okay, I looked at my wife, I'm going to dump my 401k and let's go and start something amazing. And this is actually my second business. Wow. The first business was a sauce product. Mm-hmm. And we kind of introduced that to the market and pretty successfully got it into some local specialty stores and those foods. So now we're working with, our local vendors and community to build Mister Bartender.
Wow, what a story. He wasn't lying. He really has lived at least 4 or 5 lives already and still very young. I know you joked around and said that you're an old man, but
I'm a grandpa.
Still have a lot of life to live. I want to hear the journey. So you said that you started bartending in New York. And for any of the viewers, if you've been to New York, you know that the hustle or the grind culture is totally different from here in the Carolinas. Tell us how different it was to be a bartender in New York versus bringing that to
I appreciate that
down
here,
south.
and I feel like, to step back a little bit, Wilmington is growing as a food and beverage community, and the hospitality industry is obviously always a trendy twist and turn and updating and keeping up with the trends is the word I was trying
Right.
to look for. And I feel like bigger cities, like where I'm from in New York City, do have so much to offer. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, we were doing amazing things. And like ice sculptures, for example, they're a big part of the design concept for bars. And we went to Cipriani's or these really cool balls at the Museum of Natural Sciences where they have the big globe
Yeah,
and the whales in
yeah.
the background. And they're just doing thousands and thousands of pounds of completely made of ice bars. And we were just like, wow. And, you know, those are things that were going on for decades. And I feel like when we moved to Wilmington, that idea was still not at that level where people are understanding what we're doing. So we brought down some of the concepts because when we did it in New York, the business started with the idea and the concept of doing something different at a higher level and not just a warm body serving drinks at the bar. We wanted to create an experience, create a connection with our clients, build something more than, you know, just being a bartending service. We wanted to do a guest experience for our clients to make sure when people gather at the bar, most friends and family haven't seen each other in a while on most occasions.
Right.
I feel like the first place to gravitate would be towards the bar. So you want to create that environment for people to feel comfortable and create a connection. And it starts with things like that. You know, the tangibles is about the decor, the lighting.
Right.
All these things goes into play before you even get to the bartending. So I felt like the big city concepts are finally coming down. We've been to some of the bigger cities outside of Wilmington. You might see it in the Raleigh, Charlotte area. I was actually just down there. They have some great cocktail bars. The speakeasy scene is never going to go away. And that's something that I'm attracted to. So I feel like that's something we can offer. And there's some new bars here in Wilmington that's actually picking up that concept and people are responding. So I'm excited to where it's going to go.
I'm excited also. We were talking offline how you originally started Mr. Bartender as a form of partnership with the food and beverage industry. Can you expand on that a little bit of what that meant when you started your journey and how it looks today?
Yeah, I mean, I've had an opportunity or several to grow as a manager in the role of being not just a bartender. I've worked with the Ballhead Island Country Club alongside some great bartenders there and helped mold me into what I consider myself today. And taking care of guests seems to be the highlight. It's not just making a really good cocktail or learning classic cocktails and doing it consistently well. Banquet event assistant managers at the Landfall, Country Club of Landfall, working for Brunswick Forest and these country clubs. And there's a demand of clientele there that really requires really high-end services because they pay so much for annual memberships and they want to be, you know, you have to do the wine presentation, and the fold-over napkins and pour with the J, you know, pull off and making sure everybody has the tasting and swirl correctly. There's so many details involved. But the hospitality industry, like I said, it introduced me to the idea of doing something very creative, not just, you know, just showing up every day and trying to make a cocktail, but it's creativity that goes behind it. When you pour that drink, there's so much work that goes in before that. And most mixologists or people that call themselves, you know, bartenders that do creative cocktailing have a lot of prep work to do, just like a chef. They're in the kitchen hours before you even see that plate, prepping every detail to make sure everything consistently goes out right. From the ice, cocktail ice is the thing. There's so many details involved and the way it's presented, so that helps.
And I can actually attest to that when you did one of the events for Genesis Block, small business here, the prep work, I think you came in like at least like 2 hours before the actual event, and there was, like you mentioned, ice, there was the flames, there was the peeling of the oranges. It was so much, and it was such a beautiful act of art to watch him prep for these drinks. And and also Azalea Festival, when you guys were out there, it really is, like he mentioned, so much more into it than just pouring a liquid over ice.
I'm not going to take credit for all of that. We have a really good team. I do want to mention that of creative individuals that are handpicked to be part of this brand. And they are cocktail creators as well that wrote menus in different big cities like Chicago. Lance, for example, is a mortgage broker and really good at it. But he really enjoys the creativity of being behind the bar, like with myself. So he's one of my team leads, and he's from Chicago, and he's worked for several parts of the hospitality business that I was able to be introduced to him to be part of my brand. Landon, for example, he's another great opportunity. We met at the hotel that just opened up downtown, and now he's part of my team. He's from the Asheville and San Diego area and Charlotte, and brought some of his knowledge, and he's created cocktail menus and trained staff to do it on a different level. So people like that. And Chris is one of my right side men, I want to say. He's a very smart individual, very nerdy. He has a lot of chemistry knowledge and really like random things he knows about. So I'm happy to have a combination of those people, of when they put together the brains along with mine. We sit in the room, we come up with these elaborate ideas, and sometimes it's a little too much. My kids call me extra. I know it's funny, but I feel like there's always a next level. It's kind of how I live my life. I feel like the basic stuff is what everybody can do, but if you want to be outstanding and really good at something and get to the next level, you always try to push the limits. I've always trained myself to do that. Hence, I'm never given up on being a pilot. I still think I can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's no ceilings, so I always encourage people to go to the next level.
Especially as an entrepreneur, I think sometimes we are our biggest critic. And so we always feel like there's this glass ceiling that the outside world puts on us, but really we put the limit on ourselves. So when we first identify that we can go as far as we want to, I think that's how you get to that approach of, just keep pushing for what it is that you want to get to. With that being said, we're going to come back after a quick commercial break, and Mr. Bartender himself, is going to explain how he works with the police department also to make sure that as he provides you service that you're drinking safely. So stay tuned for that. We'll be right back. See you soon. Hey guys, it's me, Rhema T. Have you been loving the content from Today with Ray? Well, while I'm working on season 4, make sure you head to the YouTube page and watch all the previous seasons. There's so many gems, so many inspiring stories, so make sure you head there. Oh, and don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Welcome back, guys. As you know, I'm here with Mr. Bartender Paul Campbell. In the first half, we talked about a wide range of everything in his background. In the second half, we're going to get into some of the things that he's looking forward to do in the future, which one of them is to work with the local law enforcement or on the state level to make sure that his business is thriving and accounting for liability when he's serving alcohol. Do you want to talk to us and elaborate a little about that?
Brought that up, Rhema. One of the aspects of our business is really focused as a small business and how to protect your business, and having a corporate veil as an LLC is just one point. And as you grow as an entrepreneur and you do multiple businesses, and as most large businesses scale or small businesses scale into a larger capacity, they do have to find ways to protect themselves. And obviously liability insurances, which is a lot of money or investment goes into that. Most clients don't really understand that part of the business, because when they look at an invoice, for example, when you bill them, they just want to know how much you charge for bartending services. But there's so much more behind that, and liability coverage is a big part of that. So we pay insurances and companies to make sure we have the right kind of coverage. And the more business you do, the more coverage you need. And when you have alcohol involved in your business portfolio, it really requires very strong attention to details. So part of my prerequisite for my team is to have them be certified as responsible alcohol servers.
Wow.
It's a state requirement, actually, and you should have that as part of any hospitality business. But as a manager, I put that into play, because when we go out to take care of guests, it's literally what we're doing. Sometimes it might not be alcohol, but some people don't have some self-control.
Right.
Always that one.
Yeah.
And they're double fisting, and my team is trained to know how to handle that kind of belligerent guests if they're over drinking. You don't really have control over how much alcohol they might be taking in before you even get to that site.
Absolutely.
And mostly at weddings, this seems to be the biggest culprits. You can't control that because it's usually in a private venue. But when we go out there, and I like a lot of our clients will know, and you'll see in our reviews, is that we really are focused on taking care of their guests. But when it comes to ALE and the local regulations and law enforcement, alcohol law enforcement, and ABC in Raleigh. We are trying to work with them hand in hand. So I've been getting on a first name basis with the law enforcement officers and having them be part of our training instead of just going to a computer and listening to the same old, looking for fake IDs or
Right.
Trying to pinpoint how to handle belligerent guests and what the procedures are. And usually that works with an establishment. But when you're doing a mobile bar service in a business like this, you really have to go in there with, you never know what you're walking in on.
Absolutely.
Parties is maybe not as accountable, but when you're in a public environment is important. So ABC in Raleigh is one of the tools we would like to implement, is taking that legislation at state level where a mobile bar business like mine, on the ones that are growing now in this state, in North Carolina, if you research it, they're growing a lot more trendy bartending services are available. And not just a catering company. Catering companies are easily to get licensed because they do a big part of their business is food related. But when you're focusing on cocktailing and you're really doing it at a high level, like Mister Bartender, it's difficult to get a license or a permit to do alcohol service alone because we're not doing food.
Right.
So our goal is to get them to understand that we're doing it on a very responsible level, a very, liability is a big part of the concern. We want to grow that brand where we are knowing that the guest is taken care of first. Maybe an annual certification, even if it's a quarterly, prerequisite in the training environment, just like they do with Serve Safe for the National Restaurant Association. They do that as a certification for managers too. And you pay a fee. We don't mind paying the fee, whatever it is. So that's our big goal with law enforcement. Maybe implement some kind of Mister Bartender app, work with Uber, even those companies and getting codes. So we want to do our own private events or our own functions and put together our own concerts because we have these ideas of working with some local venues. And, if you can get Uber codes and give those out, that's a safe way of protecting your community. And really, that's what we want to do.
I think that's such a beautiful idea.
Yeah.
And it shows the mindfulness that you have for the guests that you're serving, and especially, as you mentioned, making sure you have this approach of the guest first experience. I really find that so beautiful.
Thank you.
With that being said, I know we talked offline a little bit about how vulnerable it can be in this service as you are providing a service to your guests. But I would like to backtrack and talk about some of the vulnerabilities it is as a business for you, not only as a business itself, but a business that serves alcohol, basically. What are some of the vulnerabilities that you have seen?
In the industry overall, when you're dealing with alcohol services, I feel like from a business perspective, you do have to protect your brand, like I mentioned with liability coverage and insurance, as the vulnerability falls into play as, the last person to serve is usually the person responsible. And that is not necessarily a fair way to look at it, but that's how the law looks at it.
Yeah.
So in any case, that goes back to the bartender. It goes back to the venue with the permit or the license to serve. And that's why it's so important to not just obtain that piece of paper. And for example, if we're doing a fundraiser, a big part of our business has been branded. And the foundation of Mister Bartender, when we started 3 years ago, to backpedal a little bit, not 3 years ago, but in the first 3 years of my business, we actually did a lot of fundraising. And we found out by doing those fundraisings, even before COVID, it was more difficult to obtain a special occasions permit. So you have to go online, apply for this double application process, get the background check, your 10-year background check. They have to get the paperwork together, and it's very specific. They want a map, a layout of all the exits from the venue. Everything needs to be put together and then FedExed or, have a tracking by mail and sent to Raleigh. Now it's a lot easier. You can do it online. So the paperwork process is one of the parts that help protect the vulnerability. But I think the education of how you can go about all these different things that a lot of the clients that will book us at a wedding, for example, they still have to get permits. Most venues may not have that permit. And if they do have a license, a venue's got a mixed beverage permit or a license to serve alcohol or wine and beer, they will require, you to sign a contract that they're not really taking on the liability either.
Okay.
So I don't have a venue per se yet, but as a mobile business, when we're going into a venue to serve alcohol, that liability is literally all 100% of Mr. Bartender.
Oh,
And that's one of the reasons why when we do a bill or an invoice, I usually ask to speak to the clients first on the phone. That's why my cell phone number is on my contact information for my business. They speak to me, the 100% sole owner. I'm veteran owned. I have to protect my brand. And I feel like I have to filter out the clients that are not necessarily going to follow those somewhat policies and regulations we want to set the standard for.
right.
So it's so important. I've turned down events and parties because I don't want to say, but might be the college crowd that wants to wine and beer or just sucking down alcohol without knowing the consequences
Absolutely.
at the end. So we have to
Absolutely.
keep things like that in mind. That's just like an exaggerating, but yeah, we specifically want to kind of, just like the clients are looking at what we can offer them, we have to do the same to protect our vulnerability with our clients.
Yeah, that was very informative, especially for the viewers that's out here watching, that so much of the paperwork side, it may seem boring, literally, but it's so important to have all of these in place when you're going out to really brand yourself, because like Paul has mentioned, sometimes that liability falls on you and it can make or break a business with one event.
Absolutely.
It does just take one. So we talked about the vulnerability as far as a business, like serving alcohol, but you were talking offline. I kind of want to go into that of the personal side of like the vulnerability that you've actually experienced yourself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for me specifically, I mean, it's taking time away from family. As any entrepreneurship, and as you grow as a business, I feel like when you're self-employed, you grow in stages, right? You're an employee first, and that's from reading the Cash Flow Quadrant and Robert Kiyosaki. You go in stages. You're not just self-employed. You're going to get to a level where your business is growing, and you have to be a true business owner. You have to hire smart managers to kind of duplicate you and be in place when you can be there,
Right.
and do simultaneous events and things like that. But before you get to those stages, you kind of have to have your wife and spouse or children or partners or whoever's involved in the business all be in sync and all try to work together to help meet that mission and ultimate goal of growing the brand. And that's always been our brand. If you notice, our name, our website is MrBartenderPortCity.com. From inception, even 16 years ago when I moved to this state, my idea was not just to do MrBartenderPortCity.com. The idea is to duplicate that brand and have the nicknames of the city, MrBartenderQueenCity.com, and we're going to go to different parts of the triangle in the state and create concepts where we hire smart entrepreneurs, not necessarily a bartender. That's something to keep in mind. We don't necessarily need the most articulate bartender to come and represent our brand. Sometimes you have to undo that person's way of thinking to represent your brand because you do it a certain way.
Right.
So it's easier to train somebody who is on a neutral ground to grow with your business concept in mind. Sometimes. It depends. But if you have the combination of both, somebody's coachable and willing to learn and get to that level, we want to hire them. We want to put them on board, duplicate them into that city area and build the brand as we go. So me personally, the vulnerability falls into play with family management, probably leaving a full-time job. It's very part-time right now because I still have to pay bills and the business is still growing, but it's not to the point where you just completely use that to be your only expense to grow. Because the money goes back in the business, as any young entrepreneur will tell you, and you've been interviewing enough to know. It takes probably 3 to 5 years if you're doing your business pretty successfully to even break even. And especially in the food and beverage category, which we are part of, even though we don't have an established location or a brick and mortar, it still requires you that 3 to 5 years to kind of work out the kinks, make sure you're balancing family, not just overspending. My payroll is twice as much as it should be, but like I said, if you're building your brand, you want to hire smart people to create your business concept and build with them and let them be successful as well. That's something my mom have learned from, who has nothing, literally came from nothing. Dad passed, she's home, she's working with bare minimum of Social Security to keep her afloat, but she still finds something to give. And that's what I'm trying to do, give back to the community, create jobs, help build the fundraisers and local charities. I can name a ton of those. And, you know, it just gives me the strength to continue pushing and have people support it, and I got to thank our community for always supporting us. That's a big part of why we continue to grow.
That's beautiful, and I would like to just express again how humble you sound about your business and the fact that a lot of people glamorize the fact of entrepreneurship, and a lot of the times it gets overlooked that these people sometimes are still working full-time jobs as they pursue their dreams. And so that's really why I wanted to share stories like this so that people can come and support your business, so that you don't have to split between the two, that it's strictly just Mister Bartender, Port City. It sounds like you have so many beautiful ideas, especially expanding into other cities here in North Carolina. I want to ask you just one more question.
Yeah, please.
And it sounds like you've given a lot already, but it's a question that I ask everyone. If you had any advice to give to someone who's looking to be an entrepreneur,
Love that.
What would that be?
From reading all the books or listening to podcasts or working alongside smart entrepreneurs and learning from people, the one advice, if I was to pull one, and you probably heard it might sound like a cliche, but it's pursuing a passion for me. It's just, the story goes back to me being in the Air Force or working on Wall Street and working for these multi-million-dollar hedge funds and having unbelievable employee benefits packages and all the things, but there was no passion there. Just sitting in a cubicle and working with SAP and these unbelievable German applications that you can be proud of, and it still was not passion. It was not my connection to creativity. It wasn't me using that side of the brain. I was just going in, and it was a 9 to 5, and it was a bottom line, and looking at the clock, and it's 4:59, and we got to go, and that's it. That's a routine, Monday to Friday. And I couldn't do that for 40 years. So as an entrepreneur, I feel people do have ideas. I really believe people dream of ideas. It might happen at night. It might happen at the one time you're waking up. It might happen when you see something. And I was watching it was a show last night, and they were talking about how they invented the Slinky. It was just an accident, how the spring fell off, and that turned into one of the most popular toys in that time. And it's just simple things like that. Ideas are born from accidents or just things that you can do. My pursuit to the passion is what my advice would be for young entrepreneurs and people that want to grow their brand. Do something that you really enjoy. It doesn't feel like work anymore. And then there'll be days that you're tired and overworked, and of course that's every part of any business building process. But you'll meet people that will inspire you, and working alongside a coach, there's so many other different things that you can add that can help motivate you personally. And if you're going to do partnerships, one of the big do's and don'ts is obviously for pursuing passions and working with coaches. A partnership has to be right on the right thing, the right person. Not everybody has the same vision, even though you might be hyped in the beginning. Signing paperwork, having that contract in place, working with professionals like a CPA, and business accountants is all part of why you should have those things before you even go into business. State requirements and licenses and registering your brand and having all these things up. It'd be beneficial anyway. Look what happened in the pandemic. If you didn't have those paperwork in place, you're not going to get your SBA supposedly grants or loans. So thanks to all that stuff that was in place, we were able to have some help to survive that time. Yeah, hopefully that answered your questions. I appreciate you.
It did. If you want to see his passion in action, definitely support Paul with Mister Bartender Port City. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show. I want to thank Elevate Co-working for this beautiful space. I want to thank my producer, Vance, with Truth and Image. And, of course, you for watching this episode. Until next time, I'm Rhema T. Go out and support a local business. Bye.
Hey, guys. It's me, Rhema T, and I hope at the end of this episode you felt super inspired to shop within your local community. But make sure to tune in next week where I'll have another entrepreneur to talk about their journey, here only on YouTube.